Check Podcasts. Hi, I'm Bruce Williams. I'm the CEO of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. This is Chamber Chats, as always being recorded in the podcasting studios at the Czech Media Centre. Czech being one of our chamber champions, you know. I would like to acknowledge from the very beginning that I live and work on the unceded ancestral territory of the Lekwungen-speaking nations, known to us as the Songhees and the Esquimalt. And Chamber Chats is made possible by the support of Island Savings, a division of First West Credit Union. We're going to talk today with 3 different organizations and 3 people who are working to make our lives better. Our health, our beauty, our environment, all of it. We're going to begin, though. Have you ever heard the expression, this thing's starting to look like a tire fire or a dumpster fire? About 25 years ago, there was a tire fire in a place called Hagersville, Ontario. 14 million rubber tires were on fire, and it was an environmental disaster. And it's things like that that have led to the creation of the organization my first guest is with. Rosemary Sutton is the executive director of the Tire Stewardship of BC. Rosemary, hi, welcome. And what's the story behind the Tire Stewardship?
Hi, Bruce. Thanks for having me today. Yeah, so we're a not-for-profit organization. We're governed by a board, and we operate under the recycling regulation in British Columbia, and operate also under an extended producer responsibility plan, which is approved by the ministry. And to your point about Hagersville, that is really how this whole thing started. The Ministry of Environment started the program back in 1991. So in 2021, we celebrated our 30th anniversary and also marked the occasion of recycling our 100th millionth tire.
Wow. So before this was all underway, tires were just everywhere. Right?
They were everywhere.
Yeah.
They were in the landfill for the most part. We had a sort of a blossoming industry starting in Delta back in 1989. That company is still here today, Western Rubber, but you're absolutely right. Before the program, mainly landfill.
So how many tires are we talking now? You said you're up to 100 million, but how many do you do sort of on an annual basis?
On an annual basis, we're around 5.5 million car tire equivalents, and that's every year. Collected from well over 2,000 locations right across the province.
Yeah, so let's talk about that process for a second. There's probably somebody watching or listening right now that's thinking, oh, I need new tires. What's going to happen to my old tires? So how does that whole gathering process happen?
So basically, the majority of consumers, they go in, they buy a tire, and they leave their old ones at the retailer site. And so that's where most of our collection happens. You do have the odd occasion where, a consumer has a tire at home, more than one. They've got winter tires, summer tires, and we offer, if people go on our website, you can find a location finder there, and you can find out where to drop off your tires. But primarily, it's at those retailer sites that we pick up.
So tires are a petroleum product, correct?
Correct.
They don't break down. You can't compost them, nothing like that.
No, they do not. I have a set of 1935 tires sitting in my in garage.
Really?
Yes, I do. Yeah, they were brought into a collection event, and we kept them because it was just too unusual to have something that old.
Okay. So were they solid rubber or were they an inflatable tire?
They were solid rubber.
Yeah. And when did that switch over happen? Do you know, when we went from solid rubber to inflatable?
I don't. I'm only 21, Bruce, so I don't know the answer to that question.
Yes, yeah. I understand perfectly. Never mind. But so you gather them in that way. For example, you did a process that gathered 2,400 tires from an island, a remote island. Tell me about that.
We did. Yeah, we got a call from the Let's Talk Trash team. They're based in Powell River, and they had got reports of what they initially thought was 500 tires sitting on a little islet just off of Nelson Island. And they asked us to be involved. And so that team and Ocean Legacy Foundation were the ones, basically the heroes of this whole process. It took them 2 days, 33 volunteers who went out there and basically had to hand load these tires onto a barge and then bring them over to Powell River, hand load them into bins, and then they were brought down to Delta for recycling.
Wow.
It's a mystery as to how they ended up there. I'm sure there's some stories, folklore as to how that all happened, but nobody's got the answer. But to your point about them not breaking down, those tires looked exactly the same as they did, I guarantee you, the day that they ended up on that island, which their thinking was around the early 90s.
Isn't that something? Just disposable. People said,
Yeah,
put out of sight, out of mind, kind of thing, right? So, what's
crazy.
the process that happens in Delta? So the tire? What happens to the tire when it gets there?
Yeah, so it comes in and it basically there's two main products that they make in Delta. And so one of them is they basically shred that tire down. They remove all the steel and fiber from it. And it's basically in like little tiny black granules. And that's known in the industry as crumb rubber. And then they also take the tire, shred it, remove the steel, and they make landscaping mulch. They color it and make landscaping mulch.
Really? And it also ends
Yeah.
up in places like playgrounds and lawn bowling greens and stuff like that. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it sure does. Yeah, so the crumb rubber itself is used to make a variety of products. So you've got everything from playgrounds, as you mentioned. We've got horse mats, gym flooring, truck bed liners, tree rings, patio pavers. The list goes on and on and on of the different things that can be made from it. And I think for us, we're incredibly proud that not only does the processing of those tires occur in British Columbia, but we actually have the largest recycled rubber mat manufacturer in Abbotsford, who consumes a lot of that crumb rubber and makes a bunch of products.
So I know there's like stop stations along the Galloping Goose Trail and the E&N Trail where there's maps and things. But if you take a look at the
Yeah.
flooring that's there, it's rubber. That's what this stuff
Yes.
is, right?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And especially around town, like for your, people listening to this podcast, if you're local, we've done playgrounds. The old courthouse playground used to be Tent City.
Mm.
So the community there voted to have a playground put in, and that's our playground. That's our rubber on that surface. We've got the Sarah Beckett Memorial Playground out in Langford. That's another one. And then a fabulous one up island is the Maffeo Sutton Park. And
In
all
Nanaimo.
three of those in Nanaimo, yeah, all three of those projects received a grant from us in order to use BC recycled rubber.
Cool. So if you want to find out more about it, it's the Tire Stewardship of BC. The website is tsbc.ca. They would welcome you to go to that site and find out more about
Sure
them.
would.
Next, we're going to talk about another problem situation for a lot of people. It's another petroleum product. On Chamber Chats today, we are talking about people who are working to keep the world a better place, to make it healthier for all of us. David Laws joins us now. He is the CEO of an organization called BC Used Oil. And David is here to talk about what they do. David, how are you?
I'm pretty good, Bruce. Thanks very much for having us on today.
So this is another thing. It's kind of like talking about the tires. When you get your vehicle serviced and you do the oil change and they take the old oil out and put the new oil in, before you guys were around, what happened to that old oil?
And before there was our program, much of that was disposed or burnt. And there was a small market-based program in British Columbia, but a small percentage of it was actually recycled or turned back into new lubricating oil.
So how did your organization come to be?
Our organization, it's a requirement of the provincial government that the manufacturers and retailers of these products fund and manage a recycling program. And so 20 years ago, our program launched, and now we're collecting almost 100% of what's available for motor oil, antifreeze, filters, and the auto containers.
So the liquid part I get, but what do you do with the filters and the solid pieces?
Yeah, the filters, most people don't know that there's still a lot of oil in those filters. Well, you will know if you put it in your car and it drips all over the back of your seat.
Right.
But they're dirty. And so the oil filters are crushed. The oil in the filter is extracted, and the metal filters are turned back into recycled metal products. And the paper and plastic filters are used in waste energy.
I grew up in Ontario, and I can remember a time when sort of country roads and side roads that were very dusty, to keep the dust down, they were oiled. It was oil sprayed on. How bad was that for the planet?
That wasn't a great practice, and that's not done in British Columbia anymore.
Yeah. So how much oil are we talking about here in the course of a year across BC?
In a year, we collect and manage about 50 million liters of motor oil every year.
Okay. So how do you then get your hands on and in those materials? Where do they come from?
Yeah, this is the fun part, because we have a network across British Columbia that collects commercially from like lube shops, quick lubes, and retailers and commercial sites. as well as 300 public depots, and bring that back to recycling centers. Great news story in British Columbia. Most people probably don't know that 70% of the motor oil that's collected is turned back into new motor oil. That's one of the highest rates in the world.
Good for us and good for you. So let's get nerdy on that process now. So when you get dirty oil to turn it back into clean oil, what's the process? What's removed or taken out, and how's that done?
Yeah, most of the contaminant is water and sand and grit. It's not it's not something that really disrupts the oil viscosity too much. But it's brought back to a refinery. There's the biggest one in the Pacific Northwest is in North Vancouver, and it's a series of pipes and chemical treatments where that old oil is turned back into new lubricating oil.
So water comes out of it, and
water, other contaminants, grit, sand.
Yeah. So what happens to the grit and sand? Can it be turned into something else or a byproduct?
No, it's oily grit and sand, and that's disposed of. And water can be removed, but it's still oily water. So, but most of what's collected is turned back into new lubricating oil, separated and reblended, additives added, that kind of stuff.
Okay. So you collect that from the lube shops and the garages and the car dealerships, but people that change their own oil at home can still drop oil off. So tell me about that.
Absolutely. There's 300 sites around the province, and they're free to access for anybody that changes their own oil. I'm amazed about how many people in British Columbia still want to change their own oil, given that there's lots of quick lubes and retailers that do it, but there's a lot of people that like it. Maybe it's a bit romantic for them, but they want to have a convenient place to take it back. And if we can do that, then we're going to get it all back. About 5% of the motor oil we collect comes from the do-it-yourselfer.
That's something. So I don't speak fluent auto very well, but I do know there's different grades in viscosity. There's the 10W30. My car, I know, operates on 5W40. Does that viscosity affect the process, or is it just oil is oil?
Yeah, oil is oil. There's different chemistries, but the experts that do refining can deal with it all. So whether it's whatever grade of oil you have, take it back to the same facility, put it in one of the tanks. It'll get picked up by one of our contracted trucks and recycled.
What if it's synthetic oil?
Synthetic oil too can go through the system.
Oil is oil.
Really good chemists, in those refineries that deal with all that.
So all three of the people we're talking to here align with making the planet safer and more healthy. How does what you do align with the circular economy?
We always say that producer responsibility, or the recycling programs in BC, it's the foundation in the circular economy. Getting old products collected from around the province and brought back to where they can be managed and turned into new products.
Okay. So people probably don't know as much about your organization as they should. So we, again, will encourage you to go to the website for them. It is bcusedoil.com. And you're based here in Victoria, right, David?
Yes, I am.
And a member of the Chamber of Commerce, too. David Laws is the CEO of BC Used Oil. Okay. Talked about the tires. We talked about the oil. Next, we're going to talk about taking care of you. Chamber Chats today, we're talking with some people who are chamber members that are in the business of keeping us all healthier and in some cases more beautiful. And that's the case with my next guest. Megan Johns is the owner and operator of a place called The Green Kiss, which is located in Uptown. Megan, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so you meet somebody, you're sitting next to somebody on a plane or something, and they say, "What do you do?" And you say, "Oh, I own The Green Kiss." And then they say, "What's that?" So what's that?
They usually make a funny joke about the name. And what it is a green beauty company. So we are actually an online retailer. And then, of course, we have the brick and mortar shop here in Victoria, Uptown. And what we do is source the most effective and the truly most natural personal care products.
Okay. So what's the story behind The Green Kiss? You've been like 10 years, I believe you've been around. Is that right?
Yeah, we just celebrated 11 years in business. So my personal kind of journey with it, I have always been a singer. So I've played in local bands around town and have always slathered on a ton of stage makeup. And I ended up learning about, some of the ingredients that were in these products and realized that it is at the time, and it still is today, it was quite confusing to try and figure out, what's actually good for you and what's not. So the whole point of The Green Kiss is to take the confusion out of finding products that are healthier for your skin and body.
In a previous life, I think some people know I was a broadcaster and I did wear makeup. to do that. I'm not right now, as you can probably tell. But yeah, I mean, that was not healthy. It's not good. It clogs up your pores, and things that are promoted to be health and beauty products, ironically, a lot of them for a long time were neither. And that's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, actually, one of our best customers is a former local newscaster in town, who had a really horrible reaction after spending years and years and years of applying the conventional makeup products. And then just one day her skin couldn't take it anymore, so badly that she was actually hospitalized. And then switching over to natural products, we were one of her sources for that, alleviated that issue. But there are so many ingredients in personal care products that are linked to health concerns. There really does need to be more research on that. It's hard to do that research because who's going to fund that? The big conventional companies aren't going to be the ones to fund that. And the little guys like me don't have the budget to fund it. But on average, an adult woman usually applies up to 168 ingredients on their skin per day. Oh. And if you think about what that can accumulate in your system, that's the real mission for me, is to reduce that, what's called like your chemical body burden over time for people.
Yeah, the woman you're talking about that was a broadcaster, was it ever isolated to find out what the ingredient was that gave her that problem?
No, often I find women that are in their, probably around their 60s, I would say, have a good example for this. They'll be using some of the conventional beauty brands that they've purchased at the department store beauty counters for years. All of a sudden their eyes puff up, red, swollen, that kind of thing. And often that irritation, that reaction is coming from synthetic dyes, which does tie in greatly to what we do, because we don't carry anything with synthetic dyes in it or artificial fragrance, which a lot of green beauty companies still carry those ingredients in their products. So it's a very layered, quite confusing, industry to try and decipher when you're just, the average person wanting to take care of yourself every morning and night. So that's what we try to do.
So what are the basic ingredients in your products that differ from those other mainstream ones?
Yeah. So you'll see a lot of things like, for example, companies will say, oh, our products are preservative free. That's not good. And they likely aren't going to actually be preservative free. That's just a marketing claim. So differentiating ingredients between what we have in our products and what conventional ones do. For example, preservatives. Preservatives are usually the big culprits that are linked to potential health concerns. Most people have heard about parabens. Obviously, we don't carry anything with parabens in it. I'm really big on not fear mongering. So the kind of ironic truth about that is that parabens themselves still need a ton more research done on them to actually really determine how bad they are for people. But an example in that, so we don't carry anything with parabens in them. We don't carry anything with phenoxyethanol, which is another preservative. So our companies use preservative systems, like fermentation processes actually will help preserve things, a high content of vitamin E, rosemary oil. That's a big one to look at, is the preservation system of a product.
Yeah. Paraben is used to make candles, isn't it?
That's paraffin.
Oh, paraffin.
So parabens are a class of ingredients used in personal care products and actually food that's in there for a preservative, which you need, because if you're using a product that says that it's preservative free, unless it's just a straight oil, it needs a preservative in order to protect you from bacterial buildup.
So your retail, our other two guests today are organizations, but in retail, the pandemic was catastrophic. You do have an online thing, but I think did you find people were using makeup products less during the pandemic because they weren't going out?
Yes. Anything below that mask, sales tanked. So lipstick sales definitely dropped. The thing that I am so grateful for to this day is that taking care of yourself and doing some really great, self-care routines at home was a trend that started happening within the first week of the pandemic when you were looking at social media. And I remember that feeling of relief, like my shoulders being able to come down when I was seeing that was actually taking off. So yes, makeup sales dropped. But we were lucky in the sense that almost like a at-home spa routine kind of ritual was something that really grew in that time. We were really fortunate. We pushed very hard to make it happen, but we were actually able to grow in 2020 as a business.
And the dynamic of your team, that are working together is another part of the well-being, really. But you've got a really good dynamic with people too, don't you?
Yeah, the teams have been a big thing for me and something that's become more and more solid since the pandemic. Like all businesses in retail, food industry right now, it has been challenge after challenge since the start of COVID. Whether you're looking at the closures that happened, the labor shortage, rising costs in shipping, I could go on and on. But what that's really done is it changed the way that I hired, and it changed the type of experience that I was looking for our team members.
The website is thegreenkiss.com, and the bricks and mortar location is at Uptown. Megan, thanks for being here. Rosemary, I'm going to say one final hi and goodbye to you. Remind people once again that you are the Tire Stewardship of BC, so tsbc.ca. Rosemary, thanks for being here.
Thanks very much, Bruce.
And David Laws is the CEO of BC Used Oil, and that website is bcusedoil.com. We're going to end right now with Megan and the Green Kiss, who were a Chamber Business Award winner last year. Here's the video that went along with that. That'll end it for us. I'm Bruce Williams. We'll see you again for another Chamber Chat.
We just celebrated 10 years in business, and our mission is to basically reduce the amount of synthetic chemicals that people typically kind of unknowingly put onto their bodies. How we do that is we curate a huge selection of effective natural beauty products. When I first opened this, there really wasn't anything around that allowed people to come into a beautiful space like this and get that kind of elevated shopping experience. We're very picky about who joins the team here, so the ability to have our team really care about our community members' health, I think, is really what sets us apart. The business has become about the community that we've built. We're helping people in their skin journey and improving their skin's health, and are able to work with them to find the products that suit their needs the best. Yeah, I'm so grateful to be part of the business community here in Victoria, and it's just been an amazing experience being here.